Virginia?
No, Knoxville.
Tennessee.
Knoxville, Tennessee.
Okay.
She's not hearing us for some reason, but I
you
told her to
speak
go
up,
out and come back in. That may do it, but you're being recorded
So
now.
let's go ahead and start.
Go ahead and
Yeah,
start.
speak up, Charles.
Okay. Eric is not here. Are there any announcements or any?
Did you play any stories or?
I didn't play any stories or any quizzes or anything like that. There are great quizzes,
No trivia.
no trivia.
Ruby is the birthstone for July.
Oh, it is, isn't it? Yeah.
I've got a trivia question.
Now,
Also,
I think I may have shared it with our group. Who was the president that often referred to Billy Graham in the evenings in the White House
Eric.
studying scripture?
that's unfair because I already heard the answer.
Or you know, huh?
Was it Nixon?
No, but he probably needed it.
Yeah.
No. Was it Carter?
We're running that up. Which way should I go? Reagan?
There you go.
That's it.
Reagan.
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
What president often referred to Billy Graham in the White House and he was studying his scripture, reading his Bible? He
Huh.
would call him and ask him questions he didn't know. Right.
Nixon.
and who was it?
I thought they were too. Yeah.
Ronald Reagan. Often called him, so he must have.
Well, I guess if you're the president of the United States, yeah, you get to call anybody you want, don't you?
You have an answer too.
Yeah, that's right.
Sometimes.
They didn't have caller ID.
Okay. The lesson of the day comes from the Old Testament, but I am going to begin with passages from the New Testament. And this is a parable from Jesus about the rich young man. Now he came to Jesus and asked, "Teacher, eternal life. Why do you ask me about what is good?" Jesus replied, "There's only one that's good. The inner life, obey the commandments. Which ones did the man inquired? Jesus replied, "Do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not give false testimony, honor your father and mother, and love your neighbor as yourself." "All of these I have kept," the young man said. "What do I still lack?" Jesus answered, "If you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me." When the young man heard this, he went away because he had great wealth. Now, I have a different interpretation. This implies financial possessions. However, one could easily interpret this to be all of your possessions, and that would include your talents, your skills, and all of which makes you human. So in this lesson of the day from the Old Testament, this is represented either or by Boaz. The lesson of the day comes from the book of Ruth, second chapter. And the book of Ruth comes from the period of time around 1100 BC. It was probably written so quite after that, after David came to power. And it's judges, and there were all kinds of rules that had been made. There's a very organized political system at the time for the Israelites. And what has happened, it was in the time of Israel, a family from Bethlehem. Now, had been Bethlehem and migrated to Moab. That was Naomi. Naomi's husband died. Two sons who married Moabite women. They were childless, and then the two sons died. So here was the three daughters-in-law and Naomi trying to decide what they were going to do, and decided to go back to Bethlehem. However, in Bethlehem, the widows must support themselves. Ruth finds that a way of gleaning. Her efforts are rewarded beyond this is the general scripture in a moment. Her efforts are rewarded beyond expectation when she comes upon the field of Moab, a widow of Naomi's deceased husband. His generous patronage sustains the women through the harvest. they must eventually take extreme measures to secure themselves a more permanent livelihood. Which is Boaz at the time Moses. That ends well, and Boaz accepts responsibility and promptly arranges to redeem Naomi's land and take it as his God, the son who proves to be son Obed, who's Jesse and David. This is important in culture point. Some politically needed to tie in the Moabites to Israel proper. So this brings in the Moabite background into the lineage of David, and then essentially later on into Jesus himself. The book thus recounts the grievous loss of Naomi's family and their eventual restoration through the faithfulness of a Moabite daughter-in-law and an Israelite kinsman. Their loyal acts are all the more remarkable because they transcend not only self-interest, but also cultural boundaries. God too is at work in this story of survival, quietly but faithfully providing for those in need. In Jewish tradition, the book belongs among the 5 festal scrolls and is read during the Feast of Weeks, the celebration of the harvest season. Early Christian interpreters also emphasized how Ruth's loyalty to Naomi went beyond the requirements of the law and thus earned her a place in the genealogy of Jesus, as I indicated. The present characters of the book, Ruth and Boaz, especially embody the meaning of loyalty, faithfulness, and kindness that surpass the requirements of the law. Ruth models loyalty in her resolute commitment to Naomi and her free decision to care for her mother-in-law's needs. And Boaz also goes beyond what is required or expected when he provides grain for the widows and sees to Ruth's marriage and the redemption of Naomi's land. This can be better described in the scripture, but the purpose of the day's lesson was to remember to care for the strangers in our land. Ruth 2:4-16. Just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem. He said to the harvesters, "May the Lord be with you." And they said to him, "May the Lord bless you." Boaz said to his young man, the one who was overseeing the harvesters, "To whom does this young woman belong?" He saw a woman in the field. The young man who was overseeing the harvesters answered, "She's a young Moabite woman, the one who returned with Naomi from the territory of Moab." She said, "Please let me glean so that I might gather up grain from among the bundles behind the harvesters." She arrived and has been on her feet from morning until now and has sat down for only a moment. That's what the supervisor told Boaz. Later, Boaz said to Ruth, "Haven't you understood, my daughter? Don't go glean in another field. Don't go anywhere else. Instead, stay here with my young women. Keep your eyes on the field that they're harvesting and go along after them. I've ordered the young men not to assault you. Whether you are thirsty, go to the jugs and drink from what the young men have filled." Then she bowed down, face to the ground, and replied to him, "How is it that I found favor in your eyes, that you noticed me? I'm an immigrant." Boaz responded to her, "Everything you did for your mother-in-law, that she was aware of from the stories that come before her, after your husband's death, has been reported fully to me. How you left behind your father, your mother, and the land of your birth, and came to a people you haven't known before. May the Lord reward you for your deed. May you receive a rich reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you come to seek refuge." She said, "May I continue to find favor in your eyes, sir, because you comforted me and because you've spoken kindly to your female servant. Even though I'm not one of your female servants." At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come over here and eat some bread and dip your piece in the vinegar." Now, I had a question about this particular thing because I think dipping bread in vinegar must be just an awful kind of thing. However, when I read more, it was not straight acetic acid vinegar that was done. The typical thing, it was wine vinegar that was served to people at the time, and it had a sweeter taste and was diluted in water, so it was like refreshing. And so even today, sometimes putting a little bit of vinegar into water or something is refreshing, just like we do with Coca-Cola, except we use phosphoric acid instead of acetic acid. Those kind of drinks have been around for a long time for various reasons. They might not be up to our taste, but they're still used in some places. She sat alongside the harvesters and he served roasted grain to her. She ate, was satisfied, and had leftovers. Then she got up to glean. Boaz ordered his young men, let her glean between the bundles and don't humiliate her. Also pull out some from the bales for her. In other words, it's baled and wrapped up in, I don't know what it's wrapped up in, but I am familiar with baling hay because I've done it. And it was bound in some fashion. And so I think each bale may have weighed as much as 40 to 50 pounds. Also pull out some from the bales for her and leave them behind her to glean. And don't scold her. The key verse of this passage is, then she got up to glean. Boaz ordered the young men, let her glean between the bundles and don't humiliate her. Okay. I'd like to enter a little prayer here before we begin to ask some questions and have discussion. God, conversations about neighbors and strangers, foreigners and immigrants and aliens have a tendency to get out of hand quickly. Will you call us to love neighbors and care for immigrants and turn strangers into friends? We need your wisdom to discourse civilly. We need your grace to love without counting the cost. We need you more than ever. Amen. In the student book, it tells a story about Christina, which was an African-American minister student whose family was denied a visa for her, at least, by the U.S. government. And so the question was, what was your initial reaction to the story? And here's the story. Because I don't know whether many of you really read the text lesson with the Sunday school class. Christina was accepted to come to the United States to study at a seminary and received a full scholarship. She was overjoyed to have this opportunity, and she knew it would allow her to have a broader understanding of the world and would make her a more effective pastor when she returned to her own country in Africa. However, the conditions of Christina's visit would not allow her to bring her 17-year-old daughter with her. She had family she could leave her daughter with, but she was worried. Her country was a dangerous one for young women. It was a nervous first year at seminary, but as Christina faced her second year, she was overjoyed to learn about that her daughter had been accepted to study at a U.S. university, and she also received a full scholarship. So imagine her pain when she learned her daughter's visa had been denied, because her mother was already in the country. Mother and daughter are placed in vulnerable states, and a young woman stood to lose the opportunity to receive the education. She needed to become a nurse and return to her home country with that knowledge and skill. Christina's story is one of thousands, and I'm aware of a few of those from personal experience. Christina's story is one of thousands or similar ones, each filled with hopes and dreams. Boaz heard Ruth's story, and that made all the difference. What other stories like this do we need to hear? How should we respond? And in the teacher's portion, we'll ask the question, what was your initial reaction to the story?
Which one?
What about Christina? Or both of them? About the daughter in particular?
Would just be a smart ass. Tell her to go to Mexico and come across the border. And you wouldn't have to go through all that stuff.
So what did it deny the visa for?
Because the mother was already here.
I
Okay.
don't understand.
Yeah, I don't get that either.
Is that one of the?
Yeah, that's one of the rules.
If you have family here,
Yes,
then you can't.
you can't bring another family.
You know, I thought it was the opposite.
No, it's not. And some of the, I can tell some personal experiences.
Okay.
Okay. I belong to a large organization. I belong to one. It's a large organization that was government. And we brought people in from all over the world as visiting scientists and visiting students and so forth. And they did not send it's like somebody had said, they did not send their sorriest ones. They sent their very best ones. You did not get to come from the United States from those countries unless you were pretty sharp enough. But what would happen is some would come in on H-1B visa. And some of them would at the period end go right back to the countries. However, there are others who were important clogs in the machinery of what the work was being done with different groups. And they would have to apply again. And so there was lots of things you had to go through. And in large organizations, Chris may be involved in the policy. My wife may be involved in policy. And my first job was with the Veterans Affairs, and they believe in policy. They couldn't do anything without policy. However, at CDC, there was a quiet group of us mavericks who got things done behind the scenes that would not get through if you asked, or they would never get through. It would take forever to get the things done. And so one of those things was regarding H-1B thesis. On many occasions, because I interacted with not just one department, I had a boss and so forth, and it was not anything that you take through him because it would never get done if you went through him. But other groups within CDC would come to me. They had, and I would know the person they were talking about because I've worked with them, and ask me if I would write a letter of recommendation to hold them on for another term of H-1B visa. And I did that on multiple occasions. But I'd always asked about how they were doing in their interaction because it was pretty clear they were getting along fine. But get a little bit of information how to apply for that. That was one of the things I did that you don't get reward for or anything at all. You just do because it's the right thing to do. Yeah. And eventually, some of those folks actually did become citizens of the U.S. Later on, and still remain important parts of those departments at CDC. Now, what the minister had done was do something similar to that. It was a letter of recommendation for her daughter. And Will Strings had worked hard to get her daughter to be able to come here. So sometimes the right things involve, or doing the right thing involves a lot of effort by someone who's a citizen of the U.S. So anyone?
I think that's perfectly logical. Unfortunately, the few things that I have known about personally, one was the girl who was here and I believe she was teaching a language, and she had one of those temporary visas or something, and they sent her back. Now, I never did understand why someone who was here, who was a contributing member of the society, why they would have to leave, and all these people can come in
And unfortunately, she
and
did
get
not.
all kinds of services. And nobody seems to think that's bad.
And unfortunately, she did not have a champion to stand up for her.
I guess that's what happened.
So
We had an artist, remember, the artist, from Hungary. That we have some things at the store that he's done. Well, part of the church, and one of the best pictures of the church he drew, and he had to leave. But like I said, if he'd gone across the border, he wouldn't have had to leave.
And we can pay for his college education.
But I did these things, but I was also rewarded for it because I felt good after I'd done it. And I had good interactions with the folks that those departments that I was making
But
sure
as
they had a good
citizens,
employee.
we don't always know how to do that.
Well, what they did for me was I asked questions and they had some examples that had been done before my time came on, being the person the quiet person in the background that did those kind of things. And the reason why they had to do this way was because it was a conflict of interest if you did it from the department. So they couldn't do it. But someone who's a third party within CDC like me, who knew everybody, at least a little bit, could do it, whereas within that department they could not do it. So that's another one of the things that it had to be a third party individual that had no conflict at all with being able to make those recommendations. But I had examples, and I would go from the example and fill in what I knew about the individual a little bit, and then send it on. And I never had a failure.
Yeah, but you had the advantage of having the knowledge and the experience to know how to do that.
Well, I didn't have experience at first, but I had.
But you gave me.
But they had an advantage of somebody who would champion their cause.
Right, and that's what's, to me, is sad, is that some of these people who deserve to be able to stay don't have a champion. And don't have someone who can help them. I'm all for that happening.
And that was the case with what the example was for this minister, the student too. she was using this example too. It's obvious that they should have an opportunity to be here and and do what they need to do, either to gain the education they have and take it back, because that's important. I mean, have those interactions. There were other, not that kind of with immigrants, but visiting scientists that I had. And as I've indicated before, one thing that I did that was different than anybody else at CDC was I got close to the service engineers. When it came time for a person to come and service the instruments, they would have to be there for the whole day. And I would take them to lunch, and sometimes out of my own pocket, pay for their lunch and discuss with them. One of them was from Colombia, South America. And he spoke fairly good English. It was not perfect, but he would describe what he would do. And he lived up in North Georgia and what they would do on Sunday afternoon. So I found out interesting things about how he behaved, and his background was physics, which was my most interesting thing. And so we discussed things about technology, kinds of things, not just the microscope and things in general, but also his family and what he did. But they had, in North Georgia, you had a whole bunch of people that Colombian, Hispanic backgrounds, and they go to the soccer fields on Sunday afternoons and have soccer games among themselves. So that was the kind of lifestyle.
Charles, I challenge anybody to do this. Go to Chapel Hill. And go
Yeah,
to
we
the
just lost one.
go to the chemistry department and walk through it and see how many of the graduate students are from foreign.
Yeah.
You see very few Native Americans in any university now in the science departments.
And
Americans won't pay
engineering
the
too.
price. Americans do not pay the price to get those degrees now.
On the awards day at Auburn back in the mid-90s, my son received a very high distinguished award from aerospace engineering. And the two beside him getting awards also were each Asians.
Yeah.
So that's
What you'll see mostly.
Even when I was in school, there was a building that was called the Electrical Engineering Building. And everybody, during the time to change class, people would be piling out of that building, and none of them were, or very few of them were Native American.
while we're talking about immigrants a little bit, I'll make a little bit farm background a little later. Is your question was asked in the teacher's version was asked class, is your perspective on American immigration policy determined primarily on the basis of national political debates or by comments in scripture about how we are to treat strangers and aliens? And why?
I tell you what's happened. We don't even know what immigration policy is anymore. It seems to be a mission.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah, that's because we've had decades of both parties kicking the ball down the road and not addressing the issue and not having any kind of policy to be developed that anybody can really follow. So when it comes down to those who have to deal with the immigrants and homeland security and the others, they have a very difficult job in determining what needs to be done.
We have laws that ought to be obeyed.
But we're not obeying.
We're not doing. We're not enforcing our own laws.
And I feel sorry for the people who live closest to it. Because their whole lives are being disrupted.
That's true.
Yes.
There was an article on the news about some ranchers that these immigrants coming through, destroying all their property and what they tried to establish for many years. So they don't address that.
Yeah.
We had another case in history similar to this. I just finished a book, one of the most depressing books I've ever read in my life, about the Texans. Okies got the name during the Depression, going to California. This was Texas Okies, I guess. I did not realize this, but overlapping the Great Depression was a 4-year drought in the Midwest that are in the Texas, Oklahoma area. And those people were starving. And they made their way to California, but you read about how they were treated when they got there. And it makes us look like benevolent people with ours that are coming in compared with what the Californians did to those brothers. They starved them and worked them like slaves. And they had forced them to live just like they were slaves in floorless huts and just basically enough food to give them the energy to get out and work 12 years in the field, 12 hours in the field today. And it is, oh, it's awful to see that.
This relates a little, how much longer to extend this, but if you think there's a difference between American immigration policies, and since you don't know what they really are, between American immigration policies and scripturally informed views on immigration, do you believe that scripturally informed views should be privately practiced by Christians or used by Christians to influence the national debate?
I don't think Christian doctrine anticipated what we're facing. I think that's the problem. I think as a country, we have always,
Give me your time, your
Right.
sword.
and people have come to this country for many years, but we've never had the problem.
Well, because we don't have regulations now or strong ones that are clear, we have people abusing that.
Right, and the people who used to come, came here and wanted to
And
work.
there are many that do want to come here, get shovelled aside because of the
Right,
others too.
because of the
And because they get lumped into the same group.
with the people who want to come here, because we're offering them everything for free, for nothing, and they don't have to work for it.
Okay, now something more germane.
That was the controversial part that he mentioned last.
Are you aware, this relates to this lesson too. Are you aware of farmers, grocery stores, businesses, churches, restaurants, or government programs that attempt to provide a version of gleaning for persons today?
Version of what?
A version of gleaning for persons today. In other words, taking what might be wasted and giving to the poor.
We give an awful lot.
And they're not even gleaning.
There's no reason on earth for anybody to go hungry without a shelter in this country today.
We had a fun one when I was a student and working in the grocery store. We'd have bread that would get outdated. And when we cleaned up, a group of us, young quote unquote folks, really were pretty good young people, would load up the old bread and put it in the, take it to the poor parts of town and put it in the mailboxes.
Well, that's all right.
You can't do that today.
I'd probably get arrested.
I worked in the grocery store too, and when the milk got outdated, we took that, some of the bread stuff. They won't do it today.
Probably not.
Because, it could be, come back to that store,
Yes.
somebody gets sick or.
Right.
That's unfortunate.
Well, we used to take things that were left here in the church, that were extra here at the church to the Christian ministry, to the.
Now,
Community table.
I've told this story before about my father, just for conservation things. He would leave one row of corn near the edge of the woods and would not gather it so that the wildlife could have it every year. So he was doing that when I was growing up too. So
Then he killed wildlife.
the other thing that was novel with my father that nobody else did, we grew tobacco. And in order to gather it, we had 4 rows of tobacco. And then we had to have at least a place in the middle where the equipment would go down. And and you could have one on each side. But on the 8th one, or after the 8th row, he would have one that he grow field peas. And and he would allow people to come in and gather the field peas, but he sold some of them too. that was, I mean, no one else in the community, no one else that I know of anywhere was doing that. But that's one of the clever things he did. And they were heritage seeds apparently, because what he would do at the end of the season would be, he would take some of those seeds as it dried out. This is sort of what they were doing with the grain here. It'd be dry, he'd take them, beat them with them, put them in a bag and beat them all up. And then he would take the electric fan that we had, it had a little screen, and he would sift out the shaft. So he had both threshing, which is a beating them, and he had winnowing, which was spreading the shaft out, and then he would use those seeds next year. So that's the example that I know firsthand about talking about threshing and winnowing that he did. Now, even at that time, they had mechanized things to do the threshing and some of the winnowing, just what came in, what would come out would be the seed or the seeds into a bag at the end of the, or in a truck at the end of the process.
You sure that wasn't good? But we had the nitrogen fixation nodules on the loose and he plowed it under it.
No, he didn't have one to go. He didn't do that. So, these were dried seeds that he planted every year. They went last year. And I'm with Gene, but I have not had field beets like those brand field beets. They're variety of field beets since I was a child. And they were really, really, really good. I mean, that's so.
We get some pretty good on the market.
Well, I've seen the ones at the farmers market. They're not the same as his. So those are one of the memories I have of him. What kindnesses regarding gleaning did Boaz extend to Ruth in verses 8 and 9 that surprised you? What's surprising about that Boaz would even do this?
Yeah, the hogs for
I thought someone would come up with that. But you're not aware of God's hand in this. You see it.
I don't see a thing.
I think he was aware of Ruth's
background with Naomi. And he was rewarding kindness with kindness. That's what he was really doing. And the laws after the judges in that time for women, as they still are kind of strange and weird, and not fair in many ways, were really put them behind the 8 ball, because with no heirs, no male heirs, they had to have someone within the extended family to champion them. And they had one designated, someone that was more wealthy and so forth. And although Ruth had the property, and I think she could keep it. She needed, in order to make things really work and sell things and be able to keep on, she had to have someone, a champion within the family, to take them in. And there was the discussion between Boaz and another member. This is later on, between Boaz and another member of the family, and the other guy did, because of the Moabite issue and all this, was reluctant to do so, and Boaz decided to take Naomi and Ruth in. But before that, Naomi had discussed with Ruth what she had to do to encourage Boaz to even offer marriage, which was, in a sense, Ruth asked for marriage before Boaz asked for marriage, because she put the cloak over him and stuff. That was an indication that Naomi was asking for assistance, that she would be willing to be taken as a bride, so for her family. So that also happened.
So now Naomi was, I don't think I ever knew this. Naomi was related to both in some way.
Naomi's husband.
Okay. So therefore he had the responsibility.
He was one of the ones. She had another close. They also had another close relative who chose not to do it. So.
He had more seniority than Boaz.
Okay.
And another thing, I guess we just before close, but another thing brought out was the idea of who is a member of a group. And by her kindnesses to someone that was an Israelite, which was Naomi, Ruth to her mother-in-law, made her more. She became an automatic member of the family because of how kind she'd been to a member of the family. So there are different levels people who were actually part of the Israelite family. The Hebrew word is ger and nakiri, or nakri. So if you're kind of distant, you're nakri, and if you become really one of the group, you become a ger. So she became, so Ruth became a ger. And with that, okay, let me finish one. Go ahead.
You know, I just want to add one other thing. Reading this book sensitized me to certain things. When you read the story of Naomi and Ruth, where did they spend the night? You know what I mean? I mean,
Well, I know where one night the Ruth did spend the night on the threshing floor.
I understand, but when you hear of them being stuck out there with nothing, what did they eat for breakfast? What did they eat any breakfast? What did they spend any night? And this book just blows your mind from that standpoint. But you wonder, what do they do? How do they cook?
This time, as you said, they were on the threshing floor. That's where he slept. She slept too. Not necessarily.
Not necessarily to a band or somewhere else.
So,
Wherever they could sleep, they slept. So I'll give you the example of when I was concerned about policy. Another question is, are there times when people need to take precedence over policy? My examples of what I did is an example of doing just that. You wait to the hierarchy takes care of things, they start asking questions very much. It's not going to happen, or it's going to take forever to happen. Do y'all have any other examples of when knowing someone's story challenged how you understand our laws? I'm going to end this with a prayer by saying, God of many stories, open our ears that we may hear and learn the many lives of the people around us, and let that transform us into your family. In Jesus' name, we pray. Amen.
Next.
I haven't decided yet. That's between one and two, between two possibilities. People that,
Thank you very much.
but I think it's about the law. One of those is about the laws and rules of the Israelites and some esoterics on it. I think
You like dietary restrictions?
not so much that, some others about, okay, about who's in charge. And it involves, I think they involve women in the early church after Jesus' disciples, and it's pointing out, I think, that women had money and influence, and far more so than what some of them have today. So,
Really?